Thank you all for being here on a beautiful spring day in the Ozarks. I don't think we'll get blown away and get rained out, but we're glad that you are here today for our second edition of Lunch with a Genius. And we've got 50 or so online, and so they're watching as well. Then we'll have an opportunity in the program for you all to ask questions. This is an informal conversation. So we will get to that. But before we get to that, because this is May 4th, wow. Spring is here. Lots of things are going on campus. I mean, lots of things. And so to bring us an update, our university president, Cliff Smart.
Good, thanks, Brent. So many things are going on. I have to make some notes. It's that time of the year, and so many interesting and fun things are happening on campus. One really fun thing happened last night on a campus a little south of here, is the Bears went down to Arkansas and beat the number 4 ranked Razorbacks 6-4 in baseball last night. So, and speaking of baseball, we are hosting both the Valley softball and baseball tournaments this year in Springfield. And so baseball will be playing at Hammons Field May 24 through 28. And softball is out at Killian May 11 through 14. We should be very competitive in both. Softball is going to, I think, is locked in second place. This year, the Bears are playing really good ball right now, and so we don't get to host those, but every 5 to 6 years, and so take advantage of that this year. And then on campus, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, we have our research forums. The College of Natural and Applied Science Research Forum is Thursday, Health and Human Services is Friday, and then the Graduate Interdisciplinary Forum is Saturday. And so literally a year of work coming to an end, and presentations from students that are always exciting. Tent theater tickets went on sale this week. So like everyone, had a little bit of a supply issue with the steel going up for the new amphitheater. And so the first 2 productions will be in Craig Hall, and then we will debut the John Goodman Amphitheater for the 3rd production on Friday, September 9th, which happens to be my birthday. And I'll get to be there for that. And so again, if you tickets are really going fast. If you want to be a part of Tent Theater this summer, I would encourage you to buy season tickets and get them soon. And then last week, we announced the Broadway lineup for next year, which is going to include Hamilton. Again, great. That's a great get by Keith and his team. Been working to get that production here for the last 3+ years. So excited about that. Our graduations are on May 20th at Great Southern Bank Arena. So you may have seen, we had a little announcement that Great Southern Bank is sponsoring the arena from this point forward. And as a result of that, and some other money that has come in, we'll be in a position at the end of June, we will have paid off the half of the arena that Mr. Hammond's promised his contribution helped start. And so we're back in the position as if that complete gift had been made, and that helps us in terms of athletic funding be back on schedule for everything. And so that's a big deal, and glad to get that off my to-do list. And even as we're sitting here today, the legislature is wrapping up their budget process. State has to pass a budget by Friday, and we seem to be in a good place on that. in large part because we started in a good place with Governor Parsons' budget, but Senator Huff and others have been instrumental in keeping our funding going. We're expecting a 5.5% ongoing increase, as well as funding for multiple specific projects. And they added in additional funding to help us cover the cost of our pension increase this year. And so feel really good about where we are in terms of the budget. It is also the time of year that we complete searches for a whole variety of positions. And so Brad Bodenhausen is here. Brad, stand up. Brad, yeah, Brad is taking over as new vice president for community and global partnerships when Dr. Baker retires June 30th. Very, very pleased to have Brad on board. Our second provost and executive vice president candidate, Commissioner of Higher Ed Zora Mulligan, will be on campus Thursday and Friday of this week. The public forum is tomorrow at 3. Again, I would encourage as many people as can to attend that. Then I'll be meeting with the search committee next week, having conversations with the board at their May meeting, and then we should be in a position to make an announcement on that shortly thereafter. And then there are all kinds of student end of year banquets over the next couple of weeks, our retiree dinner on Monday night, and lots of good things happening at the university. It's a fun time, and but came mostly to hear Brent interview Bill Meadows. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Brent.
All right, let's bring our guest of honor to the hot seat. Please welcome Dr. Bill Meadows. So this is, if you were here for the first one, this is just a conversation, and then you all can have ask questions as well. But if you got this, and I have you autograph this at the end. He was on the front cover of Mind's Eye, our research magazine, in October of 21. And so let me read just a little bit about Bill. William C. Meadows. Now, what does the C stand for? Courtney. So do we call you Courtney? No, okay. Yeah. Holds a BA from Indiana University, double major in anthropology and history, an MA and a PhD in cultural anthropology from the University of Oklahoma. Okay, that was uncalled for back then. Performed field work, published in the subfields of cultural anthropology, linguistic anthropology, and archaeology. Author of 6 books. You've went to testify in front of Congress. You've been involved with the Smithsonian, Library of Congress, a number of things. So, and he's ours from Missouri State. So we're going to ask you some questions, and then you don't have to answer them, but I'll ask it another way. So Bill, tell us about your family. Where were you born? You don't have to say the year, but probably 1980, I assume. Okay. Where were you born? Tell us that part.
I was born in Bedford, Indiana. It's down in southern Indiana, about 75 miles south of Indianapolis, in 1966.
1966. So tell us about sort of growing up there. What did you do?
Grew up on a big farm on White River there. I was raised pretty much by my grandparents and my mom, and I spent a lot of time with all my I knew all my grandparents' siblings like they were my own grandparents, and so I grew up a lot around elder people, and I think that's what helped me in my work later was I could just sit and talk with people for hours, you know, and do things like that. It was rural, so tremendous amount of manual labor, you know, physical hard labor and everything, like cattle farm, crop farm, things like that. We still have that farm. It's an operating farm, and so on Christmas break, and every summer, that's where I'm at part of the time, is continuing that.
So then you went to high school there.
Yeah.
So what type of student were you in high school? And what were you involved in high school?
I probably wasn't a great student in high school. I wouldn't really say I enjoyed the experience that much. I was in sports. I wasn't, star athlete, but I really enjoyed sports. So I did cross country, wrestling, baseball, track, chess team. Social studies is the one class, those kind of history and social studies is where I excelled in those kind of classes. I had an illness when I was younger, and I got behind in math one year, and I never really caught up. And back in those days, you just sucked it up. You didn't go, I need a special accommodation, So that kind of hurt me in the sciences and things of that nature. But the history came easy, social studies, and so that's why later on when I originally went to trade school, but when I went to college, both history and anthropology both interested me, so I double majored.
So what did you do in trade school?
So I was told in high school repeatedly for 4 years that I wasn't college material, would never go to school, so forth and so on. And after a while, I believed it. And so I had a brother who's a barber. I had a distant cousin who cut hair. And so I actually went to cosmetology school and cut hair. And I worked a little while doing that in both a barber shop and a hair salon. And I always thought that'd be the greatest ethnography in the world, is to compare the two. Because there's ways that they are exactly the same. There's ways that they are worlds apart, And that was fine, enjoyed it, but it wasn't what I wanted to do forever. And so I gave that up and went back to school full time. And I was taking occasional class, but finished up my bachelor's very quickly, and then just went on through the master's and the PhD just straight through.
So Indiana University, where you went to get your bachelor's.
Yeah.
And what was that like when they told you? I mean, I don't know if you were dispersuaded to go to college, or what made that tick that you said, yeah, I am going to college, and this is where I want to go to college. Did it work that way?
No, I went through academia very backwards through the system. I actually had to trick and force Indiana University to enroll me. So
I'm familiar with that process.
I went up there to enroll one day, and all my own money. I didn't get any financial assistance, no grants, no nothing in my undergrad. It's just me and my mom. So I went there and took my transcript, and the lady just didn't want to, for whatever reason, just didn't want to enroll me. And they said, if you take four courses through Vincent's University, which has a branch in your hometown, and you make B's or better, I'll admit you. I did it on a handshake, because that's how we did things in the early 80s. I never thought about getting in writing. So I had either 3 A's and a B or 2 A's and 2 B's, but it was above what they asked for. I went back up, they still wouldn't admit me. So I said, how can I take classes? So they basically tried to sweep me under the rug, and they said, well, you can take continuing education. Oh, what's that? Well, a lot of people are retired or just, so I simply went and signed up for 15 hours the next semester through continuing education, but I was taking day classes with everyone else. I next get a phone call to come into the registration office. There's a problem. What's the problem? You have 72 hours and you haven't declared a major. I said, I can't declare a major because you are not enrolled. And it's the same, and I don't know why, there was no harsh words or anything, but it's the same lady every time. And I said it loud enough that people could hear it. And her boss came over and said, what's the problem? He said, he has 72 hours, he's not enrolled, blah, blah, blah. And she looked at him, she said, enroll him. And she said, but now. And that's actually what my plan was. I will get so many hours and the GPA will be high enough. You cannot deny me. And that's how I forced my way into education. So, if you grow up in a rural environment on a farm and those kind of things, you learn an unquenchable amount of persistence. And so I tell students the two most valuable things, in my opinion, when you come to college is time management and sheer persistence. Yep.
That's good. That's good. So did you think, as you're being a freshman there, that, did it come to mind that I am going to get a PhD?
No, again, my high school was good, don't get me wrong, but I think most of us that went there were naive about the world. And I thought you got a bachelor's and you went and got a job. And at some point somebody said, well, where are you going to graduate school? My initial thought was, why would I need to go to graduate school? But no, I didn't really foresee that. But the further I got along in it, then I knew that's what I wanted to do, you know.
So you're in a little niche area, and you're a genius in that area. So how did it, and when did it come to you that, yeah, Native American studies, this is what I want to do. I want to be an expert in that. Did it happen as a kid? Did it naturally happen, or was it later in school?
It's a little bit of everything. I grew up on a farm that has a lot of archaeological sites. So from the time I think I found my first area when I was 5 with my grandfather, and so anytime we work the fields, we find stuff all the time. I also grew up around powwows, and I had 2 great grandparents that were Native. And so I was exposed to powwows at a young age and a certain amount of events. So that interested me, and I began participating in powwows. I think I first started dancing when I was 15. So when I went to OU in '89 for grad school, my initial idea was I wanted to see what was the origin of the powwow. What came before that? Where did it come from? And that led me into what are known as military societies. They're basically fraternal organizations among Plains Indians, and they had these pre-contact, you know, and everything. But they're like their version of a VFW or an American Legion post, but traditional songs and dances. And so that led me into that. And it was during that was my dissertation. I met one of the Comanche co-talkers who was a veteran, and that's what led me on my second project, was that. So it's just kind of been a continual progression interest. That's what I do, what I enjoy.
You still do powwows?
Oh yeah, yeah. I took 3rd place at Miami a couple weekends ago.
We won't have you do one here, not unless you want to, but. So how did you get to Missouri State then? How was that journey?
You can thank Iowa, University of Iowa for that, because that was a really weird place to interview. But not getting the job there the year before, I applied here, and I'm told there was 93 candidates, and I got called down for the interview, and it just sunk, and so I got hired here in 2003, and I always say it sounds a little bit like serving time in prison, but I did 2 years at Colorado State, and I did 5 years at Indiana State before I came here. So I had quite a bit of teaching experience and a couple books under my belt and things. So I landed here, and it was to plug the core of the Native American Studies minor, which was starting that semester. So that's what I was brought here. And my background, I have archaeology background, but also then cultural, so I could teach kind of a wide range of things, you know.
So you went to Congress, you testified for a Senate subcommittee. How did all that come about?
I find humor in everything. So I get a phone call one day, 2004, I get a phone call in Strong, and is this Dr. William Meadows? Yeah, and this is such and such at the office of Senator Tom Daschle. And I thought, well, of course it is. You know, because my brother does things like this to me frequently. So at first, I didn't say anything out of the way or unkind, but I wasn't convinced, you know, and then finally he said, sir, this is the office of Senator Tom Daschle. Well, of course it is, you know. So that's when they informed me they wanted me to come up and testify on the committee. So John Kaiser was here, and he said, I'm sending you. You know, so he made sure my trip was funded to go up there, and there was I don't remember the exact title. There was a lobbyist who was kind of my guide and took me around, showed me a lot of interesting things. And then I knew a few of the people that were also going to be there, and so there was the Greg Pyle, who we recently lost, chief of the Choctaw Nation was there. Melvin Kirchie Jr., the vice chairman of the Comanche Nation, some Lakotas I knew, and different people there. So we all had that panel. It went, I thought, very well. It was very relaxing. I just sat down and literally part of the time closed my eyes and presented my 15 minutes. And we got 15 minutes of Southwest Missouri State on C-SPAN. So that's when I knew my 15 minutes of fame were over.
The front cover of Mind's Eye, so it's still going on.
But it was really enjoyable, made more contacts, of course, and then after that, the phone, my Comanche book, Comanche CoTalkers, had come out the year before, and after that, the phone really has never quit ringing to this day. And so our testimony and the records we submitted and everything, several tribes, it really, it spearheaded legislative proposal that in 4 years became the CoTalker Recognition Act of 2008. And so I get calls from tribes, from individual families, from communities. Do we have any CoTalkers, or we think, our ancestor may have been a CoTalker, and lots of research requests and things like that. So that's allowed me to kind of go over a lot of the country. I've worked with Hopi and Navajo and Pueblos out in New Mexico and Arizona, Meskwakis up in Iowa, Lakotas up in Montana, and the Dakotas, and Choctaws in Oklahoma, just all over the place. And that's been a extremely rewarding road.
So let's take it back from testifying before the Senate committee, CoTalking. Tell us how that came about in terms of your studying that, and how did you become an expert in that?
Well, there was a recognition for the 3 surviving Comanche CoTalkers and some of the Choctaws in Oklahoma about 3 months after I started grad school. And I heard about it. I didn't get to go to the event, but I heard about it. I kind of noted it and everything. When I started interviewing people for my dissertation, I was working with a Comanche elder, and my dissertation again was on these men's veterans associations. And so lots of World War II, Korea, Vietnam veterans, etc. One day we were talking, he said he was in World War II, and I said, what was your MOS, military occupation specialty, and so he kind of laughed. He says, well, they didn't really have one for what we did. And he said, in the Army, mine will say slow speed radio operator, but I actually was recruited with 16 other men in the end of 1940, about a year before Pearl Harbor. We went to Benning, basic everything, and then we were given the assignment. We want a foolproof voice-only code that is in your heads and your officer and nowhere else. And we had the tape going, and so we kind of got off the subject for about 45 minutes, and I found this really interesting because I'm generally interested in veteran subjects and things of this nature. And all their men's societies, their ceremonies are based around songs and dance that have to do with veterans. So it's a mutual fit. So man's name was Forrest Castavoy, and he said, "Hey, I can put you in touch with the other. There's 4 more of us that are still alive out of the 17. Our training officer's still alive. Why don't you do an article on that?" And so I said, "Well, Forrest, I'm right in the middle of this little thing called a dissertation, kind of thing." He said, "Oh, that could wait because this is more important."
Do that on a weekend.
That's right. That's right. So I went back to the library. I started researching. He was right. He said, "There's nothing done on it. Everybody knows about the Navajos. There's nothing on us. So I went back and started researching. We had a card catalog, as I recall. We didn't have. So I tell students about this, they panic. You go through the volumes and check, But anyway, there was nothing on them other than newspaper articles. I did contact the other guys. I started doing more research, with him specifically on that topic. And this is right in the middle of, this is in the exact middle of my dissertation. My grandfather passed. My grandfather was in World War II in Pacific. He passed at the same time. And that's where I realized these guys are all mid to upper 70s. They're not going to be here forever. I've got to do this. And so one day I went back to Forrest and I said, "I have good news. I have bad news." He said, "Well, what's the bad news?" I said, "I'm not going to be able to do that article you want on the Comanche CoTalkers." And he kind of sighed, gave a big, disappointment, And then he said, what the, something else, is good news, And I said, well, it's gonna be a book instead of an article. And he said, I tricked him. And I said, I did. Comanches are really, they tease a lot. They're fun people to be around, So I ended up writing that actually while I was also writing my dissertation, because I felt it just had to be done. And then that was my second book. And then, like I say, other people started contacting me, other tribes, and I finished the World War I book just last year, and I'm working on the World War II volume now, which has, the World War I volume has 7 groups in it. The World War II group has about 30. It's a big project. So that's just one area of my research, but that has ebbed and flowed and continued since '89, like that. And I did not, and I tell students this, I said, don't underestimate something. You may research something you don't think is important. 10 years down the road, it may really help somebody. You don't know. And so I wrote this book mostly because of the topic, my relationship with these World War II veterans and the Comanches. I didn't really think about it was going to have some bigger purpose or anything rather than the documentation. And then the CoTalker Act came up. And then the act was passed, and it will recognize any group, even continuing in the future, if we have evidence on them as being co-talkers. So again, I did not foresee where that project would take me, but I'm very thankful for where it did take me. So in all my presentations, I'm giving one tonight actually for the Army Heritage Center at Carlisle, Pennsylvania on Zoom. But I have a slide and I dedicate all my talks to that man because he's the one that set me on this path,
So CoTalking, tell us how it works.
So in World War I, Germans are, incredibly intelligent people, great linguists, great scholars. They could speak most of the languages in the world, right, at this time. So anything you form a code on, if they know your base language, they'll figure out how many vowels, consonants, they'll find the patterns, and you start chipping away until you break words and then sentences and things. So in World War I, there were several ways that they were very good at tapping into lines, like party line. They could intercept our codes and then break them. So everything we're trying to do, we are getting stymied on pretty well. And there's a couple independent cases where officers were talking to another one. And one day a gentleman in the 30s said, how is it over, at your position? We're fine. Germans have been shelling us all morning. Silly fools, they're 100 meters off. They're landing behind us. We haven't had a scratch. Within 2 minutes, the shells were right on top of him. And he realized they're hearing everything that we're saying. And we also had, we and they both had listening devices where you could sit back with a magnetic coil all the way up to 3 to 5 kilometers and pull in radio signals and listen. So they needed something that was faster than encryption that could be done open air. So they'd hear it, but they'd have no chance of breaking it. And officers who were in some of these units that knew there were a lot of Indian soldiers because they were in National Guard units before the war, they said, I've got the idea. So they pulled them up and just started having them do the messages in their language, and the Germans could hear it. But at this time, these are almost invisible languages. Even most Americans don't know anything about them here. There's very little, some of the languages do not have writing yet, so they're not written. Those that have writing, it's mostly the Bible and hymn books to sing in church. So it's local consumption. The syntax, the grammar, they're non-Indo-European languages. The Germans don't have a clue, nor would anybody else. So they can hear them all day. They don't know what it is that's being used, and they don't know what they're saying. And in time, they began to invent special coded vocabulary lists to go into the language that even the other tribal members wouldn't understand what the code words mean. So that's basically how CoTalking works. It's an unknown language with special coded vocabulary mixed in. And then they even created alphabets. So if I want to say something about Paris, I can't say it in English. Anybody in the world would recognize Paris, no matter what accent. So in Comanche, I would say, now listen to me. And I would start saying words like pear, like a pear of something, ant, rain, ice, snake. I've just spelled out the word Paris in English to you by the translation of the native words, taking the first letter of the translation. So I could specify an officer's name, a town, any place name, anything I want in a coded form.
So how many tribe languages do you speak or understand very well?
I'm still working on English. So people say I have an accent. So we all have accents.
No, we got it.
No, I don't consider myself a true linguist. I understand a fair amount of Kiowa as a spoken language. And then for other projects, it's mostly just what I've needed to know for those particular projects. So I understand a little bit of Comanche terminology and everything, but not like the whole language or anything.
So how many CoTalkers were there at the time?
Let's see, that's a good question because this is something that was developed in the field. They just made it up to solve an existing problem. There was no pre-prepared plan, directions. So the documentation is very sparse in World War I, and it's it's more substantial, but not that heavy in World War II. So we really can't say, but we know, for example, in World War I, at least 50 guys probably, we know for sure can prove it. There's probably others, but there's just no records. In World War II, we know that there are about 420 Navajo, and then there are about 260 of other groups that were used in smaller combinations.
So how many are left?
3 that I understand.
And they live?
They're all Navajo. They live in New Mexico and Arizona. Yeah. And they're all in their 90s. And so all the ones that I work with personally have gone on over the years. So, and when those last 3 go, as far as anybody knows, that will be it.
So what's next for you?
Project wise?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I have a big stove and lots of burners on it. So I'll work on something, and when I can't do any more on this one until I get back out the field, I'll move it back and I'll move it up. So I have a book under review right now on Navajo code talkers, and particularly in terms of ethnic misidentification in World War II. So the Navajo code talkers, it's 180 degrees different than the movie Wind Talkers presents. The reality was they trained the Navajos, they sent them to Guadalcanal, started implementing them. Other American soldiers thought they looked too similar to Japanese, and they would pounce on them and not shoot them, but they would capture them and take them to like the provost marshal. And so I have a picture of Frank Einhell interviewing them, you know. But anyway, and they had to get vouched, right? They had to vouch them, and that would take an hour and a half to 2 hours. And so they could not tell anyone of lower rank that they were code talkers. It was a classified program. Other Americans who had never been, they'd not grown up around Native Americans, they did not know Asian Americans. All these populations literally blended together. And so what I stumbled on was I found 27 Navajos, 3 that I got to interview in person, that were mistaken as Japanese and captured by American troops. But I also found other Native Americans. I found Chinese Americans, Korean Americans, Hispanic, Filipino, it goes on and on and on, that were mistaken. And what it boils down to is, if you really look at people's, their experience and what we would say their degree of multiculturalism, it's almost nil in the 1940s. There's no internet, there's no TV. Most people don't have access to magazines and things. And so a lot of these, they're all thrown into the Pacific. This doesn't happen in Europe the same way. They're all thrown in the Pacific in very dirty conditions, and you have a split second to decide that's a friend or a foe, you know, and they're fighting in very small islands, a lot of these, you know. So it's a very unique situation. The minute that they were identified as Native Americans, there was no prejudice. Everybody's like, oh, sorry, chief, you know, is what they called them, you know. And a lot of them told me, they said, you know, these guys are like, it was, you know, it's cliche, of course, and stereotype, but a lot of people actually considered it lucky to have a Native American in your unit and things of that nature because of these alleged, you know, skills that they're believed to all have. But a lot of guys told me, they said, I made best friends with some of the guys that mistook me. And they would say, hey, let me carry your radio for a while. it's too much weight, and so some of them become lifetime, friends and everything. So it wasn't a racial thing as much as it was a mistaken identity. And once they were cleared, it didn't matter who they were in combat. They were there beside you. And so I've discovered a whole, there was a lot of literature on the Afro-American experience, which was segregated during World War II, but there's nothing looking at the idea of misidentification of ethnic minorities in combat. And so that is at University of Nebraska right now. I have another manuscript submitting on the hand game, which is a traditional hiding and guessing game. It's a sport that's played among Plains Indians. And then I have another manuscript that's near completion on a legal case involving freedom of religion in a tribal court in Oklahoma. So I have they're all native focused, but I have very kind of broad ranging research focus.
So you traveled a bunch.
Yeah, a lot, yeah.
So where, from New Mexico to where else have you gone to study all this?
Gosh. Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, South Dakota, Montana. A lot of my life has been in Oklahoma. Gosh, I have to think Texas. A lot of time from say Albuquerque all the way up to Gallup and then all the way over into Arizona. So a lot of the West. I'm thinking primarily for where I've done research, and then of course National Archive, things back in those quarters. Virginia for the Marine Corps records a lot. I did some projects with them on their museum at the National Museum of the Marine Corps. That's the primary things I think.
So your armed services experience, anything there?
No, I'm not a veteran and everything. So
you come from a family though.
Yeah, just about everybody in there was a veteran, and my intentions would have been the Army. No offense to anybody, but that's where we had one Air Force, one Marine, one Navy. Everyone else was Army. But I come up with an illness when I was 10, and that knocked that out. So I didn't necessarily go into grad school thinking, oh, I'm going to focus on veterans, or had no necessarily intention to that. That's just where my research interest with Native American dancing, it all goes back to the veterans, and that's how it played out.
So how many Bill Meadows in America are doing what you're doing now? Are you so unique that there's just very, very few, if any, other than yourself?
On the CoTalking or just in,
Yeah.
well, there are a few other people I've seen do an article on the Navajo. I have a Navajo friend who's working on her doctorate. I wrote her a letter to go back and start her master's, and she's the daughter of one of the original 29 Navajo CoTalkers. So she did her thesis on them, and she's working on her doctorate now. But not a whole lot. There's a lot of children's books. There's a lot of authors that do basically just, they read the literature and write a junior high or a children's book on CoTalkers. There's not very many people in academia at all that focus on that. There's a handful more, it's a small community, a handful more that work on Native veterans. So I know some scholars that do that, a few in America, one in Canada, one in Australia, a couple in Europe. But it's a pretty small. Now, if you broaden it out to just Native Americans, yes, there's many more scholars, in general. But there's not as many people today working with Plains Indians as well. That's something that has been pointed out to me a few times. And I've got, let's see, a 33-year experience, particularly with the Kiowa, Comanche, and Apache in Oklahoma. So that's been the groups that I've done more things with in a wider range of things over 33 years so far.
So then, researching is one thing, and then obviously you're a professor and you teach this. So what is it that gets you excited about teaching? Or does it?
Yeah, it does. There's a lot of
Okay, it's not. Frank is not here.
Okay.
So I think your dean is here, though.
Yeah.
So Vic Matthews is. giving you the
I think
stink eye.
it's, there are some people that don't give a lot of effort, but the ones that are really there to learn, you can see the lights come on in different topics and things, because it's subjects where like I've had people, I've never ever heard that in my life. I didn't know that existed. Or even with CoTalking, I thought it was only the Navajo, or even the processes of the reservation period or what's going on. I teach like next semester, I'm teaching North American Indians Today, which is a course. Most people, again, they're so busy, they're not tuned into what are current events for these communities and these peoples, So I think that's the exciting thing, is when you see somebody get interested and latch onto something, and then they might do their term paper on it, or things. And then I've also had students that want to take that a step higher. And so they will go to Oklahoma with me for 6 weeks and do a field school, and we'll live with a family in the community and go to every realm of kind of cultural event they have.
6 weeks.
6 weeks.
Straight.
Yeah, it's boot camp.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And we're gonna talk to one of your students here in just a second, but, okay, now we're gonna do what we call rapid fire. So, we didn't tell you about this, so now's the time to get just gonna give you a question, and whatever pops in your mind, you just say it.
Okay.
You don't have a long time to think on it. You just say, then you can say pass if you want to.
Okay.
These aren't bad. Favorite place to vacation?
Home farm.
Ooh, good one. My hobby is blank.
Archaeology, reading, researching. My vocation is my avocation. There's no difference. So it really is.
Cold weather or hot weather?
It doesn't matter. I'm impervious to it. Just whatever comes. You won't hear me vent about weather. So.
Glad we didn't do this outside.
I still wouldn't vent. So.
Okay, yeah, you're a good man. Your favorite meal? Breakfast, lunch, dinner?
Brisket, and I just had some.
Oh, we planned that. Yeah, that was good.
Thank you.
Comedy movies or science fiction movies?
Oh, definitely comedy movies. I watched a lot of science fiction when I was younger, and I read a lot. But once you get into college, I once in a while I force myself to read the classics and other things just to do something different. But mostly I read factual, so it'd be the comedy.
Okay. Favorite place on campus?
My office.
Okay, take your office out. Where would you like to go? Where'd you like to hang out?
Well, Vic and I have had some good conversations in his office, so maybe his office. Yeah. He's very helpful, so.
That's good. Yeah, I usually am in trouble when I go to Vic's office. Are you an early morning person or a late night person?
A late night. I can force myself to get up for anything and do it, but the batteries really fire up after lunch, and then they go to 2 in the morning. So there's a lot of nights I'll work till 1:30 or 2, and then get up about 6:15 and get ready. So,
Wow. So tell us, do you have a typical day here?
yeah, a typical day is I get up and trying to get the little one prepared. I bring her in, drop her off at Greenwood. She's in 6th grade. Go to my office. If it's a teaching day, my teaching is pretty stacked up. So I'll have like 1 lunch break, 2 in a row, maybe a committee meeting or something. The other days where I have some windows of time, it's almost always research, working on something, most of my grading, I take it home and do it with me. When I can watch TV and enjoy myself, and I still focus. But no, when I'm in my office, I'm usually on records and research or office hours, that kind of thing.
So sports fan or more of a music fan? Or none?
Early on sports, I played all kinds of stuff. I was a catcher. I'm realizing now that was not a smart idea. My knees hurt. Now I would say more of a music fan. The greatest thing about YouTube is I can sit there and watch all the bands of the 60s and 70s and finally see what they look like. I tell students, I said, unless you watched one of the variety shows, half an hour, you never saw what the bands actually looked like when I was a kid, unless you bought the album. But now you can go back and see them all. And I just, I had Linda Ronstadt on this morning. It was great. So my music tastes are actually a little bit older than I am.
So what's your favorite group
Eagles,
then?
hands down, yeah, Eagles, yeah, absolutely. I've seen them twice, once here and once Oklahoma City.
So you were here for opening. Yeah. So do you like to read books on a Kindle or would you rather turn pages?
I won't read anything on a computer of any length. I just can't do it. I have to be able to move or be in a comfortable position. I also read when I walk the dog. So I have a book open and I'll walk the dog. And so I read all the time. People get out of your way.
Oh, where do you walk the dog at? You're not
Just
up.
up and down roads. But even in college, I realized people will just get out of your way if you're reading a book. But I have good peripheral vision, so it's not an issue.
I tried that. Yeah. See, that wasn't so bad. That was good rapid fire.
It was easy.
Okay. Now we're gonna bring one of your students up.
Okay.
Now this is where it gets real fun. Hannah Scarborough is a senior anthropology major, minors in archaeology, Native American studies, and museum studies. And you're graduating here in a couple weeks.
Yes, I am.
Yay. And you're graduating with honors and you're in the honors
I
college.
am. Yes.
And you're busy besides that.
Yes.
So you're in the band
I am. I've been in the Pride Band for 4 years.
and what do you play?
I play the clarinet. I've also been a section leader for the past 2 years. So teaching people music, learning the music. It's a lot of fun.
And you're in a National Honor Society?
Yes. So I am the president of Phi Sigma Pi. It's a gender inclusive national honor fraternity. And yeah, we have a lot of different chapters across the country.
And where are you from? Sorry.
I am from Marshfield, Missouri. So.
Yes. We know Marshfield very, very well.
Yes.
So when you came here, is this exactly what you wanted to study?
No, so actually I came here wanting to do forensic anthropology. I loved the show Bones growing up.
Yep.
So that's what brought me to anthropology. And the department head told me that there were no jobs really in forensics. So I just stuck with anthropology and I fell in love with archaeology and cultural anthropology.
So obviously you had classes, you took
Mhm.
classes from Dr. Meadows. What classes did you have?
There's many. I took intro to anthropology with him. I took cultural anthropology, Native American warriors, which is an honors class, Native Americans today. I went on the field school with him. That was, how many credits is that? So 6 credits.
It better be.
Yeah.
You're there 6
One per
weeks.
week.
Yeah.
And I took an independent study with him on Native American activism. Set it up. Yeah.
And obviously you got good grades.
I did not take the photography class. I learned enough. I'm just talking with him.
So what is it? Well, let me ask you this, though. What are you gonna do after May 20th when you go through graduation?
So I don't really have too many plans coming up. I really want to work in a museum. I think it's a great way to outreach with the public on anthropology, teach people about history and learn about other cultures' history. Yeah, but I am going to Seattle right after graduating, so.
Seattle?
Yes.
And what's in Seattle?
Just
Just
fun.
Seattle?
Yeah. Graduation trip.
That's a good one. So what is it that Dr. Meadows did to inspire you? What did you take out of all these classes?
I really found the passion for talking with people, learning their personal history. A lot of history, not just with Native Americans, but with other cultures and demographic groups, is oral history. So a lot of it's not written down. Just talking with people is a great way to learn. And I also love to talk, I love to listen. So yeah, I found a passion for that. And yeah.
So you're fortunate, you had a genius that inspired you and you made a difference. I know in her life, but I know in many lives. So that's
Yes,
pretty
of
awesome.
course.
That's what we do at Missouri State. Questions of either Hannah or Dr. Meadows. This is when it gets really, really, really good.
I was just wondering, Dr. Meadows, how was you were received by all these tribes, you know, when you first started this thing you were doing?
Basically, here's what I will say. It's always better if you have an introduction, a culture broker, right? But there's times where I've talked to an elder and they're like, you know, you need to go talk to old lady such and such, or old man such and such down the road. And they would tell me how many houses and where to go. And so even when you didn't have that, I'd knock on that. Just be straightforward and open. This is who I am. This is what I'm doing. Do you have some time I could talk to you about X? You know, I've never had anyone say no in 33 years and everything. And this is what I tell my classes, even the intro, you know, I said, I don't care what culture it is, because I worked in Japan, I worked in China a little bit, and other places. But I said, if you go there and you are sincerely interested in learning about their culture, they pick up on that and they will teach you. They will embrace you. And they don't care, you know, in the end of the day, they don't care about color and race and everything. If you really want to learn about their group, they'll take you in there. And so there's some cultures where I've been adopted into those groups. I've been named, things of that nature, and the kinship is considered real. It's not, you know, artificial and everything. But that's what I would say about that. Yeah, is that people, if you're sincere and want to learn, there's teachers everywhere for different things, you know.
Do you have a follow-up?
And also the age group that you teach, is it a wide variety, or is it just a certain age group that you teach?
I mean, most of the time it's going to be 18 to 22 or 3, somewhere around there, for the most part. We did have a graduate program in the past, and so there was a few cases where we had a little bit older, you know, older people, but yeah, it's mostly undergraduate. It's going to be the majority level and everything. But I've even taken some professors from MSU at times on just some of my weekend trips with me, so they got to attend some things and see some things like that.
Maybe you should take administrative counsel for a 6-week visit. So we can, or maybe not. Other questions? Yes.
You mentioned that you're consulting on a case of religious freedom for one of the tribes down in Oklahoma. Can you share about that or expound on that at all?
Sure. It had to do with a family basically reviving a pre-existing religious rite that was in their community, but had since died out because of government suppression. And a handful of individuals didn't agree with that. And so they basically filed a suit against it in the local CFR court, the Indian Court, or Code of Federal Regulations Court, and got a lifetime permanent restraining order against the person and everything. And on one hand, it's legal stuff, so it's very technical. On one hand, it flies in the face of everything in their tribal constitution, everything. On the other hand, there's kind of the technicality where they can do it and get away with it. But it's clear suppression of religion. There's no question about it, and everything like that. So it's a very interesting case that is looking at, as sovereignty is increasing in tribal courts and things. There are some gray areas that are coming up where people's interests are not always served by their own people.
Wait, do we have some online questions? As you look at those, yeah, Frank?
Do you have any feel for, I don't know if I'm gonna say this quite right, but there's a case right now working its way up to the Supreme Court about the legal rights of the tribes in their nations, and whether or not the non-tribal courts have a right to hear cases.
Is it McGirt?
I don't remember the name. I read it and I thought it was very interesting, but I don't remember the name.
I think it's the one right across the border here.
Yeah, it was from Oklahoma.
Yeah, came out of the Creek Nation. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
think that's it.
It's, you know, on one hand, you understand why groups want complete sovereignty and those kind of things back, because at one time they were completely sovereign nations and everything. You've also got the thing about, how is that relationship, and does that actually benefit our nation as a whole? So there's two different sides to it, of course. The case, though, or what I would say is, it really comes down to whether it's an Indian country or non-Indian country. It comes down to the thoroughness and the people running the program. If the things are actually enforced consistently and everything, then it's probably a good thing. But if there's going to be exceptions to the rules, and there's some evidence that some groups are following this much more strictly than others. And so imagine any law or rule we have, if you have two different sets of rules and one side is following this, one is doing that, you're going to have a lot of legal cases that are not always going to be found judiciously.
I'm retired military, just a little thought for you. First unit I was in, we had a soldier, his last name was Red Tomahawk, not Red Tomahawk, Red Tomahawk. I think he was Lakota. And he would dig the most beautiful fighting positions you could imagine, but he never stayed in it. I remember that so well, and I thought, is that cultural or what? Nobody ever said anything to him, but he never stayed in it. He would dig the best one in the whole unit, but he'd always be up in the tree somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know. Was he sniper or?
No, he's just a signal soldier, but he just, I don't know if it was his background. We didn't ask him because we never thought about it. It's just one of those things that you notice. And he was that way. And I always suspected it was cultural somehow because they didn't fight from fighting positions or foxholes. They didn't do that.
Well, actually, some did, yeah.
Well, maybe.
I
don't know. That's what he did.
Yeah,
Nice guy.
I'd say it's probably individual because I know plenty of guys that, in all wars that use foxholes and trenches and things. And then even in the plains traditionally, if you were surrounded, you dug breastworks and made a defensive position. So it might just be his individual preference, you know. Question back there?
I wondered if you've had any experience with the Cherokee Nation in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. We recently went there and I was just fascinated that there's a written syllabary, you know, so of their language, the
Oh, yeah.
Cherokee.
Yeah, a little bit because they had some CoTalkers in World War I. So I worked with them a little bit with some of their liaison people. But yeah, they have a exquisite museum and grounds and those kind of things. And I think the syllabary is it was developed in the 1820s. So it's been around. And then maybe you saw also the street signs are in Cherokee and English. You know, there's a lot of that. You know.
It's fascinating to us. And I think they still teach it and speak.
Yes, yeah. Oh, yeah, they teach it online and in class. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Dr. Meadows, are you concerned at all about disappearance of native and indigenous languages? And do you think there should be more things done to preserve the knowledge that is kind of hidden in those languages?
Yeah, most of these languages are all written down, recorded now. So they actually, like for CoTalking stuff, they didn't even use them in Korea. Our encryption surpassed that. But when I first started working with the Kiowas, there were probably 600 good speakers. There's under 25 now, and it's about the same for the Comanche. So yeah, I am concerned with those. There's every kind of program you can imagine being done, both Zoom, both in person, language materials. But there's a lot of factors that are undermining those efforts. And what I mean by that is, like down one of the towns I work in, there are 7 different tribes around this very small 2-county area. They all speak totally unrelated languages. They are heavily intermarried to each other and with other tribes, some with non-Indians, Asians, Hispanics, Blacks, etc. So you have increasingly diverse families where you can't speak something that everyone is going to understand unless it's English, The public schools are typically like they teach the Indian languages in the schools, but the predominant language in the schools, the restaurants, So if you kind of back off from it and think in the terms of you have a population of maybe 2,000, 15,000 and 330 million people in the country, it's the amount of situations where it's just your people now who can freely speak that are scarce, kind of thing. So they have a lot of stuff recording, but I can name 3 or 4 that I've seen go extinct since I started doing field work, And it's also, it's tough to learn a second language, particularly when you're already in high school or an adult. It's easiest if you do it as a child, kind of thing. And so, yeah, there's a great concern and there is massive efforts being directed towards it. I'm a realist, I hope they will all survive, but I do not expect some of them, particularly the smaller ones, to do so.
It's kind of like a follow-up. So are these programs trying to preserve the knowledge that is in the languages or just the languages themselves?
Oh.
I think that's kind of another layer is that there's a lot of
Yeah.
anthropology and a lot of cultural knowledge that we could just be losing as these languages go extinct.
Yeah, both. And some of the work is like semantics and things like that that's done in it. I've used some things like that in some of my studies, like I did an article on all the the Kiowa names of other tribes and all their names for different types of non-Indians and things of that nature. And then looked at them in what they call componential analysis, looking at the root term of what the name is based on. Is it in reference to their architecture, to a personal characteristic or a hairstyle? Some tribes are referred to by names with that. And that was really interesting to see what was focused on, in terms of how they viewed and how they classified other groups around them, So yeah, there's elements of both going on. Yeah.
Well, I know you need to get back to your office till 2 a.m. So I know you got things that you've got to. Hannah, first of all, thank you for being, congratulations on your graduation, and please keep us all up to date on where you're going to be. And we'll get free museum entrance tickets, I'm sure, wherever you land. We will remember that. Please.
Could I ask one thing?
Yeah.
Could I have all the veterans stand up, please?
Okay, yeah, good.
We need to recognize you all, so.
Yep. Well, thank you for being with us and sharing. We are so glad that you are ours at Missouri State, and
Good to be here.
you are a genius in your field, and that represents well of Missouri State. And as you inspire other people, you'll do the same. And so we appreciate you being here and sharing your story. And so let's please give it up for Dr. Green. So we'll be back in July 6th, and our genius is a guy by the name of David Hall. And we're going to see how he grew up to be a fireman and how that affected Missouri State. So hopefully we'll see you before then, but have a great afternoon. Go Bears. Thank you.